Good morning and welcome back to Cecilia. I've just been on a Zoom chat. How very technological of me. So I thought that while I was in the mood to be sitting in front of a camera, I would do Saturday's reading. And this Saturday's shout out is going to Tina, who sent me a lovely message at the end of Evelina saying how much she was enjoying it, and that really means a lot. And I don't know if you're reading Cecilia along with us, but if you are, I hope you're enjoying it too. And if you're not, thank you for listening to Evelina. Cecilia's money matters continue in this chapter, and it gets a little bit Dickensian as well. Chapter 4. An Evasion. Cecilia now for about a fortnight passed her time without incident. The Harrels continued their accustomed dissipation. Sir Robert Floyer, without even seeking a private conference, persevered in his attentions, and Mr. Arnott, though still silent and humble, seemed only to live by the pleasure of beholding her. She spent 2 whole days with Mrs. Delvile, both of which served to confirm her admiration of that lady and of her son, and she joined the parties of the Harrels, or stayed quietly at home according to her spirits and inclination. While she was visited by Mr. Monckton often enough to satisfy him with her proceedings, yet too seldom to betray either to herself or to the world any suspicion of his designs. Her £200, however, which was to have been returned at the end of the first week, though a fortnight was now elapsed, had not even been mentioned. She began to grow very impatient, but not knowing what course to pursue, and wanting courage to remind Mr. Harrel of his promise, she still waited the performance of it without speaking. At this time preparations were making in the family for removing to Violet Bank to spend the Easter holidays, but Cecilia, who was too much grieved at such perpetual increase of unnecessary expenses to have any enjoyment in new prospects of entertainment, had at present some business of her own which gave her full employment. The poor carpenter, whose family she had taken under her protection, was just dead, and as soon as the last duties had been paid him, she sent for his widow, and after trying to console her for the loss she had suffered, assured her she was immediately ready to fulfil the engagement into which she had entered, of assisting her to undertake some better method of procuring a livelihood, and therefore desired to know in what manner she could serve her, and what she thought herself able to do. The good woman, pouring forth thanks and praises innumerable, answered that she had a cousin who had offered for a certain premium to take her into partnership in a small haberdasher's shop. "But then, madam," continued she, "it's quite morally impossible I should raise such a sum, or else, to be sure, such a shop as that, now I am grown so poorly, would be quite a heaven upon earth to me. For my strength, madam, is almost all gone away, and when I do any hard work, it's quite a piteous sight to see me, for I'm all in a tremble after it, just as if I had an ague, and yet all the time my hands, madam, will be burning like a coal." "You have indeed been overworked," said Cecilia, "and it is high time your feeble frame should have some rest. What is the sum your cousin demands?" "Oh, madam, more than I should be able to get together in all my life, for own what I will, it goes as fast as it comes, because there's so many mouths, and small pay, and 2 of the little ones that can't help at all, and there's no Billy, madam, to work for us now." "But tell me, what is the sum?" £60, madam." "You shall have it," cried the generous Cecilia. "If the situation will make you happy, I will give it to you myself." The poor woman wept her thanks, and was long before she could sufficiently compose herself to answer the further questions of Cecilia, who next inquired what could be done with the children. Mrs. Hill, however, hitherto hopeless of such a provision for herself, had for them formed no plan. She told her, therefore, to go to her cousin, and consult upon this subject, as well as to make preparations for her own removal. The arrangement of this business now became her favourite occupation. She went herself to the shop, which was a very small one in Fetter Lane, and spoke with Mrs. Roberts, the cousin, who agreed to take the eldest girl, now 16 years of age, by way of helper, but said she had no room for no other. However, upon Cecilia's offering to raise the premium, she consented that the 2 little children should also live in the house, where they might be under the care of their mother and sister. There were still 2 others to be disposed of, but as no immediate method for providing for them occurred to Cecilia, she determined for the present to place them in some cheap school, where they might be taught plain work, which could not but prove a useful qualification for whatever sort of business they might hereafter attempt. Her plan was to bestow on Mrs. Hill and her children £100, by way of putting them all into a decent way of living, and then from time to time to make them such small presents as their future exigencies or changes of situation might require. Now, therefore, payment from Mr. Harrel became immediately necessary, for she had only £50 of the £600 she had taken up in her own possession, and her customary allowance was already so appropriated that she could make from it no considerable deduction. There is something in the sight of laborious indigence so affecting and so respectable, that it renders dissipation peculiarly contemptible, and doubles the odium of extravagance. Every time Cecilia saw this poor family, her aversion to the conduct and the principles of Mr. Harrel increased, while her delicacy of shocking or shaming him diminished, and she soon acquired for them what she had failed to acquire for herself, the spirit and resolution to claim her debt. One morning, therefore, as he was quitting the breakfast-room, she hastily arose, and following, begged to have a moment's discourse with him. They went together to the library, and after some apologies and much hesitation, she told him she fancied he had forgotten the £200 which she had lent him. "The £200?" cried he. "Oh, ay, true, I protest it had escaped me. Well, but you don't want it immediately?" "Indeed I do, if you can conveniently spare it." "Oh yes, certainly, without the least doubt, though now I think of it, it's extremely unlucky, but really just at this time, why did you not put me in mind of it before?" "I hoped you would have remembered it yourself." "I could have paid you 2 days ago extremely well. However, you shall certainly have it very soon, that you may depend upon, and a day or two can make no great difference to you." He then wished her good morning and left her. Cecilia, very much provoked, regretted that she had ever lent it at all, and determined for the future strictly to follow the advice of Mr. Monckton in trusting him no more. 2 or 3 days passed on, but still no notice was taken either of the payment or of the debt. She then resolved to renew her application, and be more serious and more urgent with him. But she found, to her utter surprise, this was not in her power, and that though she lived under the same roof with him, she had no opportunity to enforce her claim. Mr. Harrel, whenever she desired to speak with him, protested he was so much hurried he had not a moment to spare, and even when, tired of his excuses, she pursued him out of the room, he only quickened his speed, smiling, however, and bowing, and calling out, "I am vastly sorry, but I am so late now I cannot stop an instant. However, as soon as I come back, I shall be wholly at your command." When he came back, however, Sir Robert Floyer or some other gentleman was sure to be with him, and the difficulties of obtaining an audience were sure to be increased. And by this method, which he constantly practised, of avoiding any private conversation, he frustrated all her schemes of remonstrating upon his delay, since her resentment, however great, could never urge her to the indelicacy of dunning him in the presence of a third person. She was now much perplexed herself how to put into execution her plan for the Hills. She knew it would be as vain to apply for money to Mr. Briggs as for payment to Mr. Harrel. Her word, however, had been given, and her word she held sacred. She resolved, therefore, for the present to bestow upon them the £50 she still retained, and if the rest should be necessary before she became of age, to spare it, however inconveniently, from her private allowance, which by the will of her uncle was £500 a year, £250 of which Mr. Harrel received for her board and accommodations. Having settled this matter in her own mind, she went to the lodgings of Mrs. Hill in order to conclude the affair. She had found her and all her children, except the youngest, hard at work, and their honest industry so much strengthened her compassion that her wishes for serving them grew every instant more liberal. Mrs. Hill readily undertook to make her cousin accept half the premium for the present, which would suffice to fix her with 3 of her children in the shop. Cecilia then went with her to Fetter Lane, and there, drawing up herself an agreement for their entering into partnership, she made each of them sign it and take a copy, and kept a third in her own possession, after which she gave a promissory note to Mrs. Roberts for the rest of the money. She presented Mrs. Hill also with £10 to close them all decently, and enable her to send 2 of the children to school, and assured her that she would herself pay for their board and instruction till she should be established in her business, and have the power to save money for that purpose. She then put herself into a chair to return home, followed by the prayers and blessings of the whole family. Chapter 5. An Adventure. Never had the heart of Cecilia felt so light, so gay, so glowing, as after the transaction of this affair. Her life had never appeared to her so important, nor her wealth so valuable. to see 5 helpless children provided for by herself, rescued from the extremes of penury and wretchedness, and put in a way to become useful to society and comfortable to themselves. To behold their feeble mother snatched from the hardship of that labour, which, overpowering her strength, had almost destroyed her existence, now placed in a situation where a competent maintenance might be earned without fatigue, and the remnants of her days pass in easy employment. To view such sights, and have power to say, "These deeds are mine," what, to a disposition fraught with tenderness and benevolence, could give purer self-applause or more exquisite satisfaction? Such were the pleasures which regaled the reflections of Cecilia, when, in her way home, having got out of her chair to walk through the upper part of Oxford Street, she was suddenly met by the old gentleman whose emphatical addresses to her had so much excited her astonishment. He was passing quick on, but stopping the moment he perceived her, he sternly called out, "Are you proud? Are you callous? Are you hard of heart so soon?" "Put me, if you please, to some trial," cried Cecilia, with the virtuous courage of a self-acquitting conscience. "I already have," returned he indignantly, "and already I have found you faulty." "I'm sorry to hear it," said the amazed Cecilia, "but at least I hope you will tell me in what." "You refused me admittance," he answered, "yet I was your friend, yet I was willing to prolong the term of your genuine tranquillity. I pointed out to you a method of preserving peace with your own soul. I came to you in behalf of the poor, and instructed you how to merit their prayers. You heard me, you were susceptible, you complied. I meant to have repeated the lesson, to have tuned your whole heart to compassion, and to have taught you the sad duties of sympathizing humanity. For this purpose I called again, but again I was not admitted. Short was the period of my absence, yet long enough for the completion of your downfall." "Good heaven!" cried Cecilia, "how dreadful is this language! When have you called, sir? I never heard you had been at the house. Far from refusing you admittance, I wish to see you." "Indeed?" cried he with some softness. "And are you, in truth, not proud, not callous, not hard of heart? Follow me, then, and visit the humble and the poor. Follow me, and give comfort to the fallen and dejected." At this invitation, however desirous to do good, Cecilia started. The strangeness of the inviter, his flightiness, his authoritative manner, and the uncertainty whither or to whom he might carry her, made her fearful of proceeding. Yet a benevolent curiosity to see as well as serve the objects of his recommendation, joined to the eagerness of youthful integrity to clear her own character from the aspersion of hard-heartedness, soon conquered her irresolution, and making a sign to her servant to keep near her, she followed as her conductor led. He went on silently and solemnly till he came to Swallow Street. Then turning into it, he stopped at a small and mean-looking house, knocked at the door, and without asking any question of the man who opened it, beckoned her to come after him, and hastened up some narrow winding stairs. Cecilia again hesitated, but when she recollected that this old man, though little known, was frequently seen, and though with few people acquainted, was by many personally recognized, she thought it impossible he could mean her any injury. She ordered her servant, however, to come in, and bid him keep walking up and down the stairs till she returned to him, and then she obeyed the directions of her guide. He proceeded till he came to the 2nd floor. Then, again beckoning her to follow him, he opened a door and entered a small and very meanly furnished apartment. And here, to her infinite astonishment, she perceived, employed in washing some china, a very lovely young woman, genteelly dressed, and appearing hardly 17 years of age. The moment they came in, with evident marks of confusion, she instantly gave over her work, hastily putting the basin which she was washing upon the table, and endeavouring to hide the towel with which she was wiping it behind her chair. The old gentleman, advancing to her with quickness, said, "How is he now? Is he better? Will he live?" "Heaven forbid he should not," answered the young woman with emotion, "but indeed he is no better." "Look here," said he, pointing to Cecilia, "I have brought you one who has power to serve you, and to relieve your distress, one who is rolling in affluence, a stranger to ill, a novice in the world, unskilled in the miseries she is yet to endure, unconscious of the depravity into which she is to sink. Receive her benefactions while yet she is untainted, satisfied that while she aids you, she is blessing herself." The young woman, blushing and abashed, said, "You are very good to me, sir, but there is no occasion, there is no need. I have not any necessity. I am far from being so very much in want."
"Poor simple soul," interrupted the old man, "and art thou ashamed of poverty? Guard thyself from other shames, and the wealthiest may envy you. Tell here thy story, plainly, roundly, truly. Abate nothing of thy indigence, repress nothing of her liberality. The poor, not impoverished by their own guilt, are equals of the affluent, not enriched by their own virtue. Come then, and let me present ye to each other. Young as ye both are, with many years and merry sorrows to encounter, lighten the burden of each other's cares by the heart-soothing exchange of gratitude for beneficence."
He then took a hand of each, and joining them between his own,
"You," he continued, "who though rich are not hardened, and you, who though poor are not debased, why should ye not love, why should ye not cherish each other? The afflictions of life are tedious, its joys are evanescent. Ye are now both young, and with little to enjoy, will find much to suffer. Ye are both too, I believe, innocent. Oh, how could ye always remain so? Cherubs were ye then, and the sons of men might worship you."
He stopped, checked by his own rising emotion, but soon resuming his usual austerity.
"Such, however," he continued, "is not the condition of humanity. In pity, therefore, to the evils impending over both, be kind to each other. I leave you together, and to your mutual tenderness I recommend you."
Then turning particularly to Cecilia,
"Disdain not," he said, "to console the depressed. Look upon her without scorn, converse with her without contempt. Like you, she is an orphan, though not like you, an heiress. Like her, you are fatherless, though not like her, friendless. If she is awaited by the temptations of adversity, you also are surrounded by the corruptions of prosperity. Your fall is more probable, hers more excusable. Commiserate her, therefore, now. By and by she may commiserate you."
And with these words he left the room. A total silence for some time succeeded his departure. Cecilia found it difficult to recover from the surprise into which she had been thrown sufficiently for speech. In following her extraordinary director, her imagination had painted to her a scene such as she had so lately quitted, and prepared her to behold some family in distress, some helpless creature in sickness, or some children in want. But of these to see none, to meet but one person, and that one fair, young, and delicate, an introduction so singular to an object so unthought of, deprived her of all power but that of showing her amazement. Meanwhile the young woman looked scarcely less surprised, and infinitely more embarrassed. She surveyed her apartment with vexation, and her guest with confusion. She had listened to the exhortation of the old man with visible uneasiness, and now he was gone, seemed overwhelmed with shame and chagrin. Cecilia, who in observing these emotions felt both her curiosity and her compassion increase, pressed her hand as she parted with it, and when a little recovered, said, "You must think this a very strange intrusion, but the gentleman who brought me hither is perhaps so well known to you as to make his singularities plead with you their own apology." "No, indeed, madam," she answered bashfully, "he is very little known to me. But he is very good, and very desirous to do me service. But not, what I believe, he thinks me much worse off than I really am. For I assure you, madam, whatever he has said, I am not ill off at all, hardly." The various doubts to her disadvantage, which had at first, from her uncommon situation, arisen in the mind of Cecilia, this anxiety to disguise, not display her distress, considerably removed, since it cleared her of all suspicion of seeking by artifice and imposition to play upon her feelings. With a gentleness, therefore, the most soothing, she replied, "I should by no means have broken in upon you thus unexpectedly, if I had not concluded my conductor had some right to bring me. However, since we are actually met, let us remember his injunctions, and endeavour not to part, till, by a mutual exchange of goodwill, each has added a friend to the other." "You are condescending indeed, madam," answered the young woman, with an air the most humble, "looking as you look, to talk of a friend when you come to such a place as this, up 2 pairs of stairs, no furniture, no servant, everything in such disorder. Indeed, I wonder at Mr. Albany. He should not, but he thinks everybody's affairs may be made public, and he does not care what he tells, nor whose hears him. He knows not the pain he gives, nor the mischief he may do." "I am very much concerned," cried Cecilia, more and more surprised at all she heard, "to find I have been thus instrumental to distressing you." I was ignorant whither I was coming, and followed him, believe me, neither from curiosity nor inclination, but simply because I knew not how to refuse him. He is gone, however, and I will therefore relieve you by going too. But permit me to leave behind me a small testimony that the intention of my coming was not mere impertinence." She then took out her purse, but the young woman, starting back with a look of resentful mortification, exclaimed, "No, madam, you are quite mistaken. Pray put up your purse. I am no beggar. Mr. Albany's misrepresented me if he has told you I am." Cecilia, mortified in her turn at this unexpected rejection of an offer she had thought herself invited to make, stood some minutes silent, and then said, "I am far from meaning to offend you, and I sincerely beg your pardon if I have misunderstood the charge you just now given to me." "I have nothing to pardon, madam," said she, more calmly, "except indeed to Mr. Albany, and to him 'tis of no use to be angry, for he minds not what I say. He is very good, but he is very strange, for he thinks the whole world made to live in common, and that every one who is poor should ask, and every one who is rich should give. He does not know that there are many who would rather starve." "And are you," said Cecilia, half smiling, "of that number?" "No, indeed, madam, I have not so much greatness of mind, but those to whom I belong have more fortitude and higher spirit. I wish I could imitate them." Struck with the candour and simplicity of this speech, Cecilia now felt a warm desire to serve her, and taking her hand, said, "Forgive me, but though I see you wish me gone, I know not how to leave you. Recollect, therefore, the charge that has been given to us both, and if you refuse my assistance one way, point out to me in what other I may offer it." "You are very kind, madam," she answered, "and I dare say you are very good. I am sure you look so, at least. But I want nothing. I do very well, and I have hopes of doing better. Mr. Albany is too impatient. He knows, indeed, that I am not extremely rich, but he is much to blame if he supposes me therefore an object of charity, and thinks me so mean as to receive money from a stranger." "I am truly sorry," cried Cecilia, "for the error I have committed, but you must suffer me to make my peace with you before we part. Yet, till I am better known to you, I am fearful of proposing terms. Perhaps you will permit me to leave you my direction, and do me the favour to call upon you myself." "Call upon me yourself?" "Oh no, madam. I have a sick relation whom I cannot leave, and indeed if he were well he would not like me to have made an acquaintance while I am in this place. I hope you are not his only nurse. I am sure you do not look able to bear such fatigue. Has he a physician? Is he properly attended?" "No, madam, he has no physician and no attendants at all." "And is it possible that in such a situation you can refuse to be assisted? Surely you should accept some help for him, if not for yourself." "But what will that signify when, if I do, he will not make use of it, and when he'd 1,000 times rather die than let any one know he is in want?" "Take it then unknown to him. Serve him without acquainting him, you serve him. Surely you would not suffer him to perish without aid." "Heaven forbid! But what can I do? I am under his command, madam, not he under mine." "Is he your father? Pardon my question, but your youth seems much to want such a protector." "No, madam, I have no father. I was happier when I had. He is my brother." "And what is his illness?" "A fever." "A fever, and without a physician? Are you sure, too, it is not infectious?" "Oh yes, too sure." "Too sure? How so?" "Because I know too well the occasion of it." "And what is the occasion?" cried Cecilia, again taking her hand. "Pray trust me. Indeed you shall not repent your confidence. Your reserve hitherto has only raised you in my esteem, but do not carry it so far as to mortify me by a total rejection of my good offices." "Ah, madam," said the young woman, sighing, "you ought to be good, I am sure, for you will draw all out of me by such kindness as this. The occasion was a neglected wound, never properly healed." "A wound? Is he in the army?" "No, he was shot through the side in a duel." "In a duel!" exclaimed Cecilia. "Pray, what is his name?" "Oh, that I must not tell you. His name is a great secret now while he is in this poor place, for I know he'd almost rather never see the light again than have it known." "Surely, surely," cried Cecilia with much emotion, "he cannot, I hope he cannot be Mr. Belfield." "Ah, heaven!" cried the young woman, screaming, "do you then know him?" Here in mutual astonishment they looked at each other. "You are then," said Cecilia, "the sister of Mr Belfield? And Mr Belfield is thus sick, his wound is not yet healed, and he is without any help." "And who, madam, are you?" cried she, "and how is it you know him?" "My name is Beverley." "Ah!" exclaimed she again, "I fear I have done nothing but mischief. I know very well who you are now, madam, but if my brother discovers that I have betrayed him, he will take it very unkind, and perhaps never forgive me." "Be not alarmed," cried Cecilia, "rest assured he shall never know of it. Is he not now in the country?" "No, madam, he is now in the very next room." "But what is become of the surgeon who used to attend him, and why does he not still visit him?" "It is in vain now to hide anything from you. My brother deceived him, and said he was going out of town merely to get rid of him." "And what could induce him to act so strangely?" "A reason which you, madam, I hope will never know. Poverty. He would not run up a bill he could not pay." "Good heaven! But what can be done for him? He must not be suffered to linger thus. We must contrive some method of relieving and assisting him, whether he will consent or not." "I fear that will not be possible. One of his friends has already found him out, and has written him the kindest letter, but he would not answer it, and would not see him, and was only fretted and angry." "Well," said Cecilia, "I will not keep you longer, lest he should be alarmed by your absence. Tomorrow morning, with your leave, I will call upon you again, and then I hope he will permit me to make some effort to assist you." "If it only depended upon me, madam," she answered, "now I have the honour to know who you are, I believe I should not make much scruple, for I was not brought up to notions so high as my brother. Ah, happy had it been for him, for me, for all his family, if he had not had them neither." Cecilia then repeated her expressions of comfort and kindness, and took her leave. This little adventure gave her infinite concern. All the horror which the duel had originally occasioned her again returned. She accused herself with much bitterness for having brought it on, and finding that Mr Belfield was so cruelly a sufferer both in his health and his affairs, she thought it incumbent upon her to relieve him to the utmost of her ability. His sister too had extremely interested her. Her youth, and the uncommon artlessness of her conversation, added to her melancholy situation and the loveliness of her person, excited in her a desire to serve, and an inclination to love her, and she determined, if she found her as deserving as she seemed engaging, not only to assist her at present, but if her distresses continued, to receive her into her own house in future. Again she regretted the undue detention of her £200. What she now had to spare was extremely inadequate to what she now wished to bestow, and she looked forward to the conclusion of her minority with increasing eagerness. The generous and elegant plan of life she then intended to pursue daily gained ground in her imagination, and credit in her opinion. I think it's very interesting. Well, two things strike me about the episode I've just read. Firstly, that it really is quite unusual, I think, to see a novel with this kind of theme where the protagonist is a woman. And I said this in my introduction, but sorry, I lost my train of thought. But the idea of visiting the poor is something that genteel women of the time did. But when you think about a lot of novels, the idea of the spirited benefactor, the lively, active agent of change, is so much a man. And I was really struck when she said, "What's your name?" And she said, "My name is Beverley, not Miss Beverley, or my name is Cecilia Beverley, but Beverley," which is the way a man would introduce themselves. And I think, and actually, even just reading that last chapter of the conversation between Cecilia and Miss Belfield, it wouldn't pass the Bechdel test. For those of you who don't know, that's a test where two women have a conversation between them and they do not talk about a man. So it wouldn't pass the Bechdel test because they're talking about first Mr Albany and then about Belfield, though neither of them are in love with these men. So it's sort of, at least it's not quite as bad as it could be. But it's nevertheless, it feels refreshing to have a conversation, a serious conversation about their lives, what they can do, between two women in a novel that is not, well, in any novel of this period, really, actually, even though these are written by women. I'm thinking Evelina. Yes, there were conversations between women, between Evelina and Mrs. Selwyn, between Evelina and Mrs. Mervyn, the sort of mother-daughter conversations. They were always very focused on Evelina's love life and her prospects. And I feel like this is something different. This is Cecilia as an active agent going out into the world and meeting people and having conversations with women about their lives. And I think, I'm not sure, would you see that in Dickens? Possibly. I don't subscribe to the idea that Dickens can't write women. That seems to be very popular at the moment. But so I may well be barking up the wrong tree. At any rate, whether it's unusual or not, it's pleasant and refreshing to read such a conversation. And the second thing that strikes me is just how little has changed and how little the discussions have changed. Here we've got Belfield, who sent away his surgeon because he couldn't pay the medical bills. I mean, without wishing to labour a point, but look at America, where people are having to make these decisions all the time. Yeah, anyway, you could draw as many parallels as you like for yourselves. Anyway, have a good Saturday.